Welcome to another episode of The Marketer's Edge, a series designed to share senior level marketing perspective about marketer challenges, opportunities, and agency relationships. Our goal is to help marketers learn from other marketers across different industries and help provide perspective for agencies about the things marketers deal with every day to help them better represent their clients and win new business. Today, we're talking with Lisa Chase, a Senior Director of Strategic Planning for the ENT department at Mount Sinai. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us today. How have you been?
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me here, Mark.
Absolutely, was really looking forward to it. I've got a small handful of questions for you today, but maybe before we get to those questions, can you tell me a little bit about Mount Sinai and your role in the organization so our viewers know what kind of healthcare organization it is and a bit, learn a little bit more about what you do for them?
Sure, certainly. So, the Mount Sinai Health System is an academic medical center. We have 8 hospitals and one school, the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. It is a full on everything you need to have for a hospital, stemming from primary care to all tertiary care. We're very well known for difficult cases, multiple cancers. Even in the ear, nose, and throat department, we have head and neck surgery for head and neck cancers. So very wide breadth of what we treat at the Mount Sinai Health System, and it's spanning the 5 boroughs in New York City. I stemmed from the central marketing area, so we were servicing, like we were an in-house agency servicing all of the service lines in the entire hospital system as well as the school. I then moved to the Department of Otolaryngology when we wound up with a merger back in 2012. So we went from one hospital and one school to now what is 8 hospitals and one school. We have 14 locations in the Department of ENT. So I do all traditional
Wow.
and digital marketing, social media, all of the messaging for it, strategic planning and operations, primarily in the vein of the digital operations for appointment booking. So that's my bailiwick. And recently I took on a concierge medicine program in-house. We started that in 2019,
Okay.
and it's primarily for a B2B outreach effort for our referring physicians.
Okay. Great. Wow. That's it probably keeps you pretty busy every day, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Never a dull day.
Um, I was curious if I'm remembering correctly, prior to working at Mount Sinai, what were you doing prior to this? I remember there being something a little bit different and interesting.
I sure. Actually, I was at Montefiore Medical Center, but before I got there, I was in journalism, and the juncture that pushed me into
That's
healthcare
right.
was I was writing for a healthcare column for the New York Daily News. So I was happy to
Okay.
kind of just
That's
hang
right.
my journalism hat up and move into
Yeah.
healthcare. I've never had a boring day in my life here. It just has been one of the most fascinating fields, and just trying to be a patient advocate is really what I aim to do
That's
every day,
great.
whether that's in my website copy or an ad that we're running. But I always say to everyone, sometimes the decision is for patients not to come to your hospital as well as to come to your hospital. And that's our job as marketers to really say, this is what we're really good at, and these are where our
Yeah.
highlights are at the system.
That's great. Yeah, I was just curious with that, some of those different experiences that you had prior to entering into the world of healthcare. Has that sort of impacted your approach or your perspective, any, in terms of how you market or how you think strategically in managing the business of the health system?
That's an excellent question. And yes, definitely. The patient experience has really been a vein of all of my marketing efforts, even stemming back from central marketing. And in fact, once I got into the Department of ENT, we had a struggling physician who really needed to bolster up his surgeries and his volume. And we took only one patient who was just this extraordinary patient who had a head and neck cancer. And he did everything on every platform that we could have ever thought of: social media,
Oh, wow.
press, video, every educational seminars about HPV, the correlation to head and neck cancers, and we wound up spiking his surgical volume by like 57% by the end of the year. It was a big dramatic change, just taking one patient to
Wow.
tell a story. Because it's one thing for us as marketers or even the physicians to say, here's what we're good at, but it's so much better when you can take an actual client of yours, it doesn't have to be healthcare, just to say, hey, I endorse this product or this service because of the fact that I just had the most wonderful experience of my life. And in this
Yeah.
case, he's
Wow.
alive to talk about it.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, I got goosebumps just thinking about it. It just seems so inspiring, and yeah, I would imagine that it I'm not surprised that it had the impact that it had. That's fantastic. Um, so you've probably seen a lot of change in the world of healthcare marketing over the 11 years you've been, at the system. Other than, the likely increased activity in digital social channels, what would you say some of the bigger shifts have been, either in the way you're marketing or the market in general or consumers in general? What do you think some of those have been?
Well, I'm sure your marketing audience is probably going to agree with me that my marketing spend has dramatically decreased for traditional and has moved, I would say, about 70% into all digital, meaning social media as well as search engine marketing and any type of website promotion there, blogs, everything that falls under social media. However, I think the most dramatic shift I've seen, besides the huge push into digital and recently also into video, is just the overwhelming need in the healthcare space for telemedicine. It was a huge shift in 2020 at the onset of the pandemic to move from in office
Sure.
to telemedicine. So 100% of my marketing budget shifted. It was the quickest shift I've ever done in marketing in my life. It was an entire shift of my whole budget from everything that was laid out for the rest of the year to just digital and to just
Wow.
telemedicine. So it was one message. But
Hmm.
one thing I learned out of that was that it wound up being such a strong message because everything was so concentrated. It wasn't dispersed over different divisions that do different services. It wasn't, a traditional spattering here or a location marketing there. It was everybody in the system was just on board for telemedicine. And it wasn't a huge
Wow.
spend. I have to say, my search engine marketing alone was under $30,000 to last me for at least 4 months. But we went very hard and strong with a Facebook and Instagram campaign. Those two channels were selected, very
Okay.
strategically because those were the ones that we were seeing our best returns and conversions out of. I know it's a little harder to measure with Instagram than it is with Facebook, but we had a very interesting experience about doing A/B testing on Facebook. We pretty much took the same copy in two different
Hmm.
photographs, and one was very realistic of this surgeon who had just kind of flown in. He was doing telemedicine. He was still in his scrubs. And we took another wonderful, clean shot of this gentleman with his, the surgeon with his iPad, and the clean shot wound up channeling better on Facebook, and this like lively shot wound up doing better on Instagram. And it was just ironic because the physician who did better
Oh,
on
that's
Facebook was a
interesting.
really big enthusiast of Instagram. So he was like actually disappointed that he didn't perform better in Instagram.
Maybe not so much anymore.
Yeah, we
That's
all
very
laughed.
funny. No, I was just going to ask, with telemedicine,
Yeah.
the explosion of it over the last couple of years, just your prediction, do you see it still sticking and being a thing as we move forward over the next, 2 to 3 years, hopefully in a non-pandemic state?
Yes, and in fact, I would say it's probably going to be a forever state of 15 to
Okay.
20%, not the pandemic, but telemedicine. So we saw, a decline, obviously, when we went back to the office, and that was expected. One way I'm kind of optimizing some surgeon schedules is to either have a full telemedicine day still on their schedule so that they can relax on a Friday and take, whatever telemedicine that they need to do.
Nice.
Sometimes they're just double booking, so they're in office and they're double booking a telemedicine. So when they have a very short visit in office for particularly follow-ups, they can then take the telemedicine to kind of like fill up their schedule and kind of optimize their schedule. But I do foresee this being a good like 15%. So it's not something to ever walk away from. And in fact, I'm part of a grant right now that is a device company. It's actually TytoCare, and we're putting devices into primary care offices to see if we can get patients treated better, particularly pediatrics, when moms can't just make it all of a sudden to over to the doctor's office. So we're measuring outcomes and the speed at which they are actually being treated, and then whatever type of follow-up that they are going to need. So that is currently in the works right now. And I think
Hmm.
that the devices are really going to become the future of telemedicine. They're getting cheaper and cheaper, just like all technology. I think
Right.
that one day you are very likely in your future going to have some type of telemedicine kit at your home. You're going to
Hmm.
be able to do a camera like down in a little wire down your throat. You're going to be able to do some type of
Hmm.
scoping of your ear or your nose, and
Wow.
it just, yeah, I think the future is very bright for it. I know people are
Yeah.
down on it right now because everyone's just so excited to get back to life. I mean, we're all included, I'm sure, in that. But there will be a space for this, and I think the convenience of not having to commute to your doctor's office is very special.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I was going to ask you about your predictions for the next 5 to 10 years, and that's a pretty interesting one, and frankly, one that seems, while it seems a little bit out there, it doesn't seem unrealistic in terms of being able to achieve that kind of an end. Um, let's just jump back maybe to a few more marketing questions. With you marketing, and I may get this wrong, and forgive me if I do, but with you marketing one department of a pretty large hospital system, how does the system keep everything on the same track, sort of presenting themselves in the same way, carrying the right tone and the character and its messaging across different departments? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Even when I was in central marketing, we always had an agency. They were always the ones to drive the brand. And then the branding, we wound up changing after the merger just to kind of say that we're kind of a new and refreshed. We had a tired logo. So that was redone in 2013 and everything was redone. I mean, we're talking every white coat, every sign across all of our locations. And then every single hospital was just changed over in probably within 8 months. We got 100% of that done. It also was about a $2 million digital spend that we spent just on the
Okay.
branding alone. In addition to that, we had plenty of traditional ads that were going on the traditional side. I was primarily working in the digital side at that time. It still continues today. I was actually serving on a brand council that we had in marketing to make sure everybody was compliant with that. We also have a brand
Okay.
website, which I think is really smart. So it's just a website that Mount Sinai employees can access at any time. And we're talking letterhead, logos, anything that you would like to download, and they're all in every different type of format. So I thought that was very smart. It's very
Hmm.
easy to access. It's very easy to download assets for that. In addition to that, they still have an agency working on, just branding across the system. We all report up into the branding powers that be to cross every dot and or cross every T and dot every I in terms of all of our
Okay.
brochures that we make on the departmental level. All of our any material, any collateral goes through them just to double check that we're in compliance with our
Right.
logo.
Right.
And I just think that it's a really good consistent message with taglines. And it's been a really good integrated marketing
That,
department. So we
that,
have calls regularly twice a week just with the regular marketing department. We have a
okay.
creative director who sits in central marketing. He and his creative team interface with the agency. And then we as departmental marketers interface with the agency for smaller campaigns. So
Got it.
when, I run search engine marketing campaigns similar to the telemedicine, I actually have 5 of them running right now for different divisional initiatives. But we're able to interact directly with them. Central marketing then becomes the reverse role, and they're in a tertiary role, whereas we're in the tertiary role for the branding of it. But I know
Got it.
you're very
Got it.
agency
Okay.
heavy with your audience, and we do have that mixed agency versus in-house. So I'm a
Hmm.
really huge advocate of this because our in-house people are so tied to the brand and so tied to what we do that sometimes an
I
agency just
bet.
glosses over highlights or they miss something. It's really critical, I feel like, even in a small organization, to have people inside, however many you can afford to have, as well
Right.
as people on the outside, because I would never really want to do a search engine marketing campaign without an agency. They have better rates, they have better people who are able to say, hey, you might even want to change something as small as a structured snippet to try to better optimize your click-through rate or your
Yep.
cost per call. So I feel like that we work symbiotically with them, but that the in-house people are so very important because they're there every day.
Got it. So you've got an in-house team, and then you work selectively with certain agencies. Are they filling specific needs that you feel like your in-house team just doesn't have the maybe technical expertise to satisfy?
Yes, particularly with the search engine marketing. We do
Okay.
not have an internal search engine marketing team. I don't know that that's even necessarily worth it. I mean, they have specialty areas in the agency of just optimizing, keywords and running reports and, going to Google and getting best rates and making recommendations on these keywords versus those keywords. I even just wound up running keywords double in 2 areas, even though they were broken out by zip codes. I sort of had a competing campaign and had to revisit my own keywords that I created.
Nice.
So I feel like
Nice.
that they have a really good pulse on very technical areas. Same with placements of ads. I'm running some traditional ads in Long Island and New Jersey right now, and sometimes you'll just get something better because the agency orders so
Yeah.
much from them. So I just
Right.
recently got a Q&A associated with what I was thinking was only a traditional ad placement. So I was super excited to get the advertorial with that. So
Okay.
they definitely
Cool.
bring benefits to the table.
Any advice you'd give to a healthcare marketer thinking about bringing an agency on board for the first time?
Yeah, definitely vet. I think you have to be comfortable with your agency. I mean, you might think one is bringing more to the table, but you really have to be able to have that communication path. I know some agencies in the past, we've had limited communications because it's a cost. Other
Okay.
times it's, we like to brainstorm with them too, just to make sure that we all get on the same page and see how we can optimize that. So I just feel like almost like a gut instinct feeling. And then it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, they're all going to come to the table with really good digital and traditional solutions.
Hmm.
If you're digital heavy, some of them are a little bit more digital heavy. Definitely ask the question of like what percentage of the business that you do in the area that you would like to see it go. If you're more
Right.
traditional heavy, and then even just working with booth displays, things like that. Like we do a lot of conferences. Like never
Okay.
underestimate that they get branded too, and they need to have taglines and all good things like that. And could they negotiate rates for you over at conferences, or is that not their bailiwick? So just get as
Sure.
nitty gritty as you can, because
Okay.
this is going to be a partner that you're not going to want to drop, necessarily. I mean,
Right.
like 3 to 5 years is really where you should be going with your agency at
Right.
minimum, just to say we're in a partnership together to move
Yeah.
the needle. And if you can't move the needle together, then you shouldn't have one force pulling more weight. It should be an equidistant force.
That's great advice. Absolutely. You guys should work as a partnership, and sometimes agencies kind of let themselves fall into the more doer executor role, and I think it's within their control to some degree to be able to prevent that from happening, and I think it being able to think like a business partner and not just a communication or creative vendor
Yeah.
is the first step that they need to take. So last question, if an agency was trying to knock down your door and attempting to win business from you, what advice would you give them?
I would say, make your price as competitive as possible, because some of them have large fees associated with add-ons that go on throughout the year. I learned a hard lesson. I was clinging on to an agency that was kind of going out the door last year or the year before, and
Okay.
I really, really had a wonderful relationship with them in terms of search engine marketing, and asked for them to stay on, because smaller campaigns like mine and ANT were still going on, and they said yes. But what happened was that they had an agency fee that was covered originally by Mount Sinai that
Mm,
left when we got the other agencies. So I wound up having to pay more because that agency wasn't covered. So
mm.
for additional data reports or additional calls, I wound up actually
Lovely.
having to tack on, whereas all of that stuff was actually covered beforehand. So I would say
Okay.
definitely be transparent about pricing. What
Sure.
are you getting? How much time are you getting? We keep going back and forth with our agencies with how much time are we allowed? How many data reports are we allowed? For me, data is everything, in terms of where do I go next, or what trend am I seeing, or how does this content piece need to then play out on other platforms? Is it
Right.
performing? If we don't get regular data reports, we wind up being lost in a fog.
Yeah, say it
So
makes it hard hard to manage your business.
yes. So ask religiously about like data reports and fees, and how do you communicate with your clients,
Right.
and what is the cadence of your communications, and what is the cadence of your data
Cool.
reports? And then, maybe ask them too, like, how have you changed a campaign, or the brand, and how much have you moved the needle? Like, have you increased brand awareness? What
Hmm.
type of brand markers do you have? Like, are you using brand software to track all of your markers? And are you in that space together? And what has been your like greatest success story, and what's been your greatest failure story? I always
Yeah.
ask that. I even ask that of interviewees that are,
Yeah.
coming from Mount Sinai.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and I think taking sort of more of that case study approach to evaluating agencies, share with them what your challenges are and see if they've been able to address similar things for other clients, and all the things you brought up relative to reporting and data and analytics, all those things, they're just becoming more and more critical, and I think it's good, it's right for the agency to be transparent, and it's right for marketers like you to ask those tough questions up front. Actually, they shouldn't be tough questions, but ask those questions up front, to get at that information. So well, this has been great, Lisa. I really appreciate it. You've given us some great things to think about, both the marketers that'll be watching as well as the agencies, just different ways to think about the business. Interesting. I'll look forward to getting my kit sometime, and practicing, using telemedicine. I think that day
Great.
probably is not too far away.
Good,
But
good.
yeah, no, it's been great. I really appreciate the time, and you've given us some great things to think about. And you have a super rest of the day.
You too. Thank you very, very much for having me here today.
All right. Thanks a lot.